And actually, we didn't get the autopsy report back until June of 2020, a full 2 years and 1 month after he died, because of the hurricane devastation that happened and so many people died in Puerto Rico that there was literally a backlog of dead people that they had to look at.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. Hey, happy week to you all, or sad week to y'all, depending on how you are doing. It's Chelsea, who else? No one else but Chelsea. I don't feel like rhyming, so I just won't. Hey, people, pay me for my embarrassment. It's so good to be back. I love doing this every week. We're well into the season. This is episode 3. Can't wait to chat with you guys. And as always, if you want to share the story of your grief or your anticipatory grief, you can hit me at the gram at DyingOfLaughterPodcast. Send me a voice memo, share your story, tell me your person's name, what you're going through. Always happy to collab, and I will get back to you because grief sucks, but it sucks a little less when you have other people to suck it with, to do it with, to listen, to be a part of your story. You get it. Today we're speaking with my pal, Emily Trio. We met at BuzzFeed during the pandemic. She was my BuzzFeed buddy. She's a producer and an editor. And today we talk about losing her twin brother at 23 to an accidental overdose. We also talk about when your parents are extremely divorced, losing all of your grandparents in childhood, overcoming anxiety, exploring what happens when you die overseas. And of course, twin loss specifically is very specific. And I'm just so grateful to Emily for sharing the story, not only of brother loss, but twin loss. And for those of you who are twins or know someone who's a twin, I think this story will really help you heal and find comfort in the uncomfortable. Emily, you are an incredible human being. I miss your face on Zoom. Getting to do all of these meetings and videos together during the quarantine was a very special but fucked up time to share with you. Also, Emily produced and edited a video that I made with my mom about talking about how my mom has stage 4 breast cancer, and it was like a whole BuzzFeed moment. I'll share the link to that YouTube video we made for BuzzFeed in the show notes here. And without further ado, Emily, god damn it, you awesome soul, you. She also has a new cute puppy. Go to her gram to check that out. Emily Trio, let's do this. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming today. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your grief story and honoring your brother today. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course. I know we got to work on some grief content together almost a year ago now at BuzzFeed. I feel like for a lot of the BuzzFeed videos, when we were doing grief stuff, it's like the videos are short, so there's only so much you can get into. And that's why I love podcasts, to hear the full story.
Yeah, really got to skim the surface with those little videos.
Yeah. So for those listeners who don't know you, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about your upbringing, who you grew up with, and where you grew up.
I am from Malvern, Pennsylvania, which is part of the Main Line, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. I grew up with a twin brother named Tommy, and my parents were extremely divorced. And then in 2007, my little half-sister was born named Mia. And she's my dad's other kid. And I love her very much. And that is, it was a pretty normal-ish childhood, I guess, plus the divorce. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And when you say extremely divorced, I'm not to LOL, but I'm like chuckling. I'm like, yeah, what does that mean? So they did not get along? Were they not friends?
Yeah, just, just one of those marriages where you're like, oops, this was a mistake. And it happens, it happens. But they had kids before they could have a clean break. So you know how that goes.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that's relatable for people in divorced situations who are like, yes, me too. So Tommy was your twin, and I'm really grateful to hear more about your story there. I think specifically to people with close relationships with their brothers and twins specifically. Before we go there, one question I ask everyone on this show is about their goldfish moment. And their goldfish moment is the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way. For some people, it was a goldfish. Does something from your childhood come to mind? Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you. So all of my like biological grandparents died by the time I was like 14. My first experience with death was, I think it was like 5 or 6. My mom's mom died. She had a pretty rough stint with cancer. And so that was really it. But I was so young and so shielded from it that it was just more awkward. And I was just like, we went to the funeral and I just remember thinking like, okay, can we go now? Like, this is so weird, and like it wasn't really discussed what it meant. We didn't really ask any questions because we also didn't really see this grandmother a whole lot either. So, and it sounds so terrible to say, but it's like our lives, like it didn't really matter, to a 5-year-old kid who didn't see this person. So, but that was my first experience. And then like every, 3 or 4 years, another grandparent would drop off or something. And it was, setting. I mean, the older you get, the more you realize what's going on. And so it's, it hits home a little bit harder. But I wasn't really like super close with any of my grandparents. So I had a very kind of like laissez-faire view of death, especially when people's like grandparents died. And I hate to say it, but I really didn't have like a lot of, I don't want to say sympathy, but I was just like, oh yeah, oh, your grandparent. Okay. Yeah. Bummer. And I guess somewhere along, like in the middle of all of that, I remember being like a sophomore in high school. I was like 14 or 15. And I remember like getting ready for bed. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die someday. And I was like, oh my God, my dad's going to die someday. And then I was like, I just run through, I'd host like 7 funerals in my head each night of like everyone dying and like what that would be like. And it really like kept me up at night. And I was kind of like, not necessarily obsessed with it. That's kind of a strong word, but I was just like, I went to school the next day and I looked at my teacher and I was like, he's going to die, dude. I was like, everyone in this room is going to die. And it really was like very unsettling. And honestly, I still kind of feel like that. Like I still definitely stay awake at night and I'm like, oh my God, like we're just going to not exist. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's something that I'm still kind of like dealing with, that same thought process, like, 10 years later. So yeah, death is like definitely a huge part of my life, I guess, in a weird way and in a like anxiety way, but for sure.
I so appreciate that story. And then when you were saying I was hosting 7 funerals in my mind every night, I was like, that's something. I'm like, is that a TV show? Like
Yeah.
the 7 funerals every night. It's like Hanukkah, 8 nights, 7 nights of
Yeah.
funerals. I don't know where I'm going with that. But I relate when you say it's a big part of your life in this interesting way. Because when you think about it, I mean, a lot of our friends, let's say 20s, 30s, I mean, even if you're healthy and you're in your 20s or 30s, that's essentially anywhere from 25 to 30% of your life is over if you're lucky. And we don't even know if that's the truth. And yet most people don't think about that, which is interesting.
I got goosebumps. Exactly. I think about that shit all the time. Like every time I get in my car, I'm like, all right, let's drive safe,
You're like,
Let's do what
okay,
we can.
we're doing it again. It's interesting that you mention having that interest or those pondering thoughts in high school. That was before you experienced this loss of your brother. Do you think that that was because you had lost so many grandparents, or was there a certain movie or conversation that you had that led you to that, do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I honestly think it's just like I'm realizing now. I mean, I feel like I'm a very anxious person now, but I'm realizing that I was always anxious. I think just the older you get, it's like the more life you live, the more shit you experience. And I feel like everyone's just naturally, it's like, oh my God, anxiety all the time. You just got to kind of like be okay with, whatever happens. Like that letting go part's really hard for me. But I think it was, yeah, a combo of my grandparents dying. And I've never really been a religious person, but every once in a while when I was really young and I would have like those thoughts of death or something, or like just, I was having an anxious moment, I would pray to my grandparents and I'd be like, yo, pop, like whoever's up there, whoever's listening, if anyone's like checked in to me, just like, I'm thinking about this and I don't like it. So please just like, well, just, I don't know. It made me feel better. Obviously it's not like I was, nobody was talking back to me or anything, but it made me feel better to at least just acknowledge like that I was feeling bad and scared about it, and just like literally shooting it out of my body always felt and still feels good. But yeah, I don't necessarily like do my version of praying too much anymore, but it helped when I was young for sure. 'Cause like you don't know what to do, you're anxious. Like I wasn't also close with my parents until I'm really close with my parents now, my dad and my stepmom specifically, but it was like I was like 16 before I was like, "Hey, I'm having like a really hard time." And they're like, "We know. Can you please tell us about it so we can help you?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." Like it's that easy. But so yeah, a lot of my adolescence, I would say, I was spent kind of like in my room alone, being sad and like anxious. And yeah, just, coping with it myself. I've always kind of dealt with my issues the best, I guess, like by myself. And so it was really yeah, I don't know, just like letting other people in has been life changing.
I love that. I love that they're like, yes, we know. We've been waiting for 4 years for you to mention
We can
this.
tell.
Yeah. You're like, okay, great. Well, that's cool that you've developed a stronger relationship as you've gotten older. I mean, I think a lot of relationships start out in maybe ways that aren't ideal or picture perfect or how your friends are. And there's always a chance to improve upon them, as you just mentioned. So that's good to hear and a good reminder, because I feel like things can feel so permanent, right? Like this is bizarre, so it'll always be bizarre. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing about your angst and your adolescence and all of those things. Aren't you so glad that we're not 15 anymore? That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Get me out of there. Middle school, high school. No, you couldn't pay me enough money to redo that.
Like,
Not at
imagine
all.
actually going through that again. Like, no, thank you. I mean, good for us. I guess that's the only way out is through. There's not another option, but
Absolutely. Yeah, you gotta go through those woods. That's for sure. Oh,
thank gosh. And now we have our own set of things. But I think in a way, the awareness of death and grief that you have, I have, whoever listening might have, it is, I feel like it's like, okay, maybe more angst than someone else who's not thinking about it at all, but there is a clarity around it and it is kind of freeing in a way. Do you ever find that when you're really, really stressed about something or upset, you can kind of click into like, oh, well, I mean, hey, there's only so much time in life. Like, how long am I going to spend dwelling on this? Does it ever help you in a way to have that angst?
it definitely does. I think it's a motivator, right? Because I feel like at this point in our lives, we can recognize when we're not feeling so hot. And hopefully by now, like we've developed our own coping mechanisms where it's like, okay, you can take a step back and be like, you're pissed about this, and that's fine. Or like you're upset about something. And like, yeah, just it's a motivator to be like, okay, like let's make ourselves feel better, however that works for us. And yeah, just trying to get over it as fast as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey losing Tommy. And if you could
Yeah.
walk
Let's
us,
dive right in.
let's dive right in. If you could walk us through the timeline or what you feel comfortable sharing. And I know you were young at 23, and this will be really helpful to people who lost siblings young. So thank you again for opening up.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, yeah, so Tommy was my twin. We, I mean, twins. We were in the freaking womb together. We quite literally did everything together. And we like went through everything together. And we were very similar, but also very, very different in our own ways. I mean, like for starters, he was a boy and I was a girl. And so that had its own little slew of issues growing up too. But yeah, we just, we our parents were really divorced and the divorce was tough. And I think we both coped with it very differently. I kind of took, and still do, I think, take more of a mother bear approach where if I'm faced with some sort of adversity, I try to like own the situation, like make sure everyone's like safe and just try to get out of there. Like I don't really face conflict. I just try to like get out of conflict, if that makes sense, depending, of course, on what it is. But Tommy was always very like, we're going to confront it head on. He was like a little firecracker, wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers. And so that's, I think, where we were really different, where I was a little more like shy and reserved and anxious, as I said. And he was very like, whatever. And so he eventually, like growing up, it was tough. And so we both coped with it. And like I said, I spent a lot of time in my room and I was just kind of like self-soothing and playing music and kind of like really leaned into my own like areas of creativity to kind of distract and make something out of these feelings that I was feeling and like getting them out. And I can point to things that I've done in my life where I was like, oh, when I did this, I was feeling like this. When I did this, this was happening. And it kind of helps get it out and make it real and like allows you to acknowledge it, but still be distant from it. And Tommy, God bless him, turned to drugs. And apparently he started doing like a bunch of acid when he was like 13. And I just found that out a couple of years ago. My parents did a really good job at shielding me from it. But again, because we were so different, growing up, I felt like I had to kind of protect Tommy from himself almost because he would start some, problems. He was just like a little annoying kid. And so I would try to like, I was like, if like twin telepathy is real, like Tommy, please stop talking, or like, please stop doing this, or something. So we would, it would just make the situation easier. And twin telepathy isn't real, but we did actually have same dreams sometimes. We had very similar dreams, which was
Wow.
cool. But yeah, so it was just, he kind of got in with like, the drug crowd and started doing all this. And our relationship became really, really difficult because we were also twins. And we went to the same school, we had classes together sometimes. And it was really embarrassing sometimes because he and we got so different. Just again, because of our coping mechanism. I mean, we were going through the same things at home and our coping mechanisms were totally different. And his unfortunately changed his whole personality. And so it was really tough. Like we were both silly and we were both pretty outgoing. And like Tommy, towards the end of high school, was certainly like very popular because he was just ridiculous. He was acting out in class. He would like curse, but he was also very charming. And so that's how he got away with everything he did, because everyone was, some teachers were like, that Tommy trio, gotta watch out for him. And then other ones would, like think he was funny, and he was, he was great. Like before he got really bad, he had wonderful taste in music. He was really driven. He always wanted to for some reason, he wanted to go to like the University of Texas. For some reason, he just like, he wanted to go, he wanted to do things. He was always on top. Like he was like, I feel like I'm pretty trendy, but looking back, like Tommy was exceptionally trendy. And he was definitely a huge people person. Like, I think he was definitely smarter and cooler than me and like would have, really excelled. But again, these drugs just get you, and they keep you down, and you always know what you're going to get when you take them. And I think that's what he really relied on. But yeah, so then we went to college, went to different colleges. He didn't finish.
Where did you guys go?
I went to Emerson College in Boston, and he went to Westchester University in Westchester, Pennsylvania. It was like, pretty much like the college in our town, essentially. And he didn't finish. He had a really tough time. He was partying a lot and getting in trouble. And, he wanted to go to a bigger school in the city, but my parents were like, that's a little too far away and you're a little too self-destructive. And like, they just, they needed to be there. And it kind of sucked because like, looking back, I don't envy, I feel so bad for my parents because like their son, died of an accidental overdose. So that like, I can't imagine that feeling. And so they were like doing everything they could. And it's, it's a lot of tough decisions. It's tough love. It's not letting your kid do what they want to do because they're not really able to make those decisions. But also when your child is an adult, there's only so much you can control. And so it was tough. It was really, really tough for all those years. And my parents, again, did a really good job of kind of keeping me separate. At that point, I wanted to be separate because, again, I had spent so much of my childhood trying to like protect him. And so it's just like, it's tough. It's really tough. And I think going to college and being away from each other really, really helped because we instantly pretty much got closer. He came to visit me in college one weekend my freshman year. It was like parents' weekend with my mom. And it was really fun. And like we went out and like partied and stuff. And, it was fine. Like I never, I've done some drugs, but like I've never done drugs, so it's like it was a safe party. We're all together with my friends, we were both having a good time, we missed each other, like it was really lovely. And it really felt like a turning point in our relationship where I was like, finally we're able to have like this, which you always hear happens, right, with kids. It's like siblings growing up, sometimes it can be pretty pretty tough, and then you get older and it gets better and you recognize the contributions you've each made to each other's lives and will keep making. And it's wonderful. It's great to have a sibling. But yeah, so anyway, college. So I graduated and he didn't. And he came to my college graduation and it was just like, it sucked because he should have been graduating like that same weekend too, theoretically. So that was hard. And I know that he like wasn't jealous of me, but I think he was just upset because he had a good time in college, of course, but just he had a little bit too good of a time in college. So it was just tricky, and on the drive back from Boston after graduation, I mean, like in the car ride home, I was literally helping him write a letter to his college for him to get like readmitted, like essentially just like a plea. And that sucks, where I just like graduated college and then he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to get back in. Can you help me?" And he didn't end up going back. He just started working, and my parents' friend gave him a job as a lineman, which so he was like working at this cable company, like in the telephone lines, like redoing. I don't actually know what the hell those guys do, but it seems like a really scary job, and that's what my brother was doing. But this particular company, my parents' friend's company, they did mandatory drug tests, and so that was that was like the thing where it's like, okay, like you're gonna get drug tested every week. And if it comes up positive, you're done. And so for a while it was obviously working, and he didn't have a car at the time either. So like one of the guy who owns the company, his son, was picking up Tommy and like dropping him off at home. Like it was, it was working. He wasn't doing drugs, he was getting paid, and he was within like the family friend ecosystem. So it felt safe. And like we again couldn't necessarily, we can't control him, but it was a good stepping stone, and it felt like it might work. And then one day came up positive for, I think it was like cocaine or something, and he got fired. So then he was just hanging out again. He had his own apartment still in Westchester, in that town where he went to school. And his landlord actually had another cable company. It was the same thing, weirdly enough. And this was back in 2017 or 2018, like right after the hurricanes happened in Puerto Rico and like destroyed everything. And so this guy's cable company was like gonna go work in Puerto Rico to help work on like the power grid. So it took Tommy to Puerto Rico, which was exciting for him, but we were all like, fuck, like he's going to Puerto Rico. And so yeah, he was working, and he was pretty, unsupervised. I mean, he's an adult, so whatever, but he was able to do what he wanted. And he was back doing drugs there because they weren't getting drug tested. And weirdly enough, like a movie, he was supposed to come home, like the job was done, they're all supposed to come home, and the day that he was supposed to catch his flight, he died, which was really upsetting. But it was on like a Monday, and I was at work, and I remember I had just made this like stupid video of BuzzFeed where we were just like filming. It's like when the coffee is not strong enough. It was like literally just us putting like Snickers and like other stupid shit in this coffee cup and like making this monstrous drink for because content and because that was my job. And then, like an hour later, I get a call. My brother died, and I was making this stupid video when he died. And it really kind of hit home that it was like, how different our lives were and how sad my brother must have been for all these years that he, was turning to drugs, to like hard drugs to help with everything. And, I made it out all right. And I think he was proud of that. Like every time we would talk, and we wouldn't talk a lot, I'd try to keep in touch with him, and he'd have new phones all the time, or he'd just straight up ignore us. And I think another thing too, I skipped right over it, but a week before he died, he called me from a phone number I didn't have, which is like very much drug addiction thing. I mean, depending of course on who it is and how. Well, the number I didn't have, and he was still again at work, and he was like noticeably very high, and I just tried to stay on the phone with him for as long as possible. I think we talked for like, I don't know, maybe like an hour, like a while. We talked for a long time. So again, I hadn't talked to him in like months. It had been a long time, and it was in May, and I hadn't seen him. Like normally I would just go home for Christmas, and he wasn't home for Christmas the year before he died. So I hadn't seen him like over a year. And actually the last time I did see him was my college graduation. So it was just like really a lot of like weird milestones that like aren't fun, that like weren't fun. And especially now, like it's just I don't know, it just all feels like a stupid movie, you know. But he told me he was very high, and it was, you know, I was just it was just, and it was weird, and I could tell he kept saying like, you know, I love you and I miss you and like I want to see you and when I come to California and I have a girlfriend out here and like she's really cool and she's like artsy like you and I think you'd really like her and just like he was like, I think I'm coming home next week. And it was just like all this good stuff, except like he was very high.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm certainly not a scientist or like an addiction expert, but from like other accounts I've heard, right, where with overdoses specifically, it's like, you know, he was doing okay. Like I guess he was like sustaining his addiction, but then like I think that week that he knew he was coming home, like he must have been on a bender or something, and they were just like party, like you know, who knows? We'll never know. But yeah, it was just kind of like one of those like weird manic phone calls where it's like, why are you calling? And I feel like I've heard so many other accounts of people who have experienced a loss from addiction from overdose that have that same kind of like manic phone call right before they die, and it's really spooky. And I called my dad afterwards, and apparently the day before, a couple hours before, he called my dad, and it was like the same thing. And it was just really, you know, unsettling. And at the time, I mean, you know, he was alive, so we were like, oh man, like he was high, you know, haha, hope he's okay. Like there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, and then a week later, whoops. So yeah, I was at work. It was like the end of the day. My mom called me like hysterically crying. Oh, it was terrible. Oh my God. I mean, awful. And I was at work, right? So I had to be like, I had to like hold, it's like holding in vomit, right? I had to wait until I was outside and then just like lost it. And I remember the security guard at BuzzFeed came over to me and he was like, are you okay? And I was like, no. Do I look okay? Absolutely not. So it was tough. And again, my parents are like really divorced. So my mom tried to call my dad, but he wasn't answering because they were at my little sister's freaking band concert. And so I finally got a hold of my dad, and I was a mess. And I was like, you know, mom just called me and told me that like Tommy died, and he was like, what the fuck? And you know, it was just like that they were in public at my little sister's band concert, and they were like a mess in the parking lot, and everyone was like, what the fuck? Like it was terrible. You know, it's terrible. It's terrible. So yeah, then I guess
Did your dad not know when you had called him?
I don't think so. I'm not sure if my mom texted him, but I do remember I called him and I was like, this is what I just found out. So it's all kind of a blur. Yeah, I don't know if my dad knew or not. I think he was just, you know, just blacked it all out. It was obviously a very terrible day. But yeah, so it was just like a lot of back and forth with me and my parents. I mean, I'm the only one out here. I think at the time, actually, I had a cousin who lived out here, actually really close by, but she reached out to me and was like, do you want to come over? Like, should we come over there? And I was like, again, having spent my whole life kind of like self-soothing alone, I was like, I'm actually like, I'm okay. I'm good. I just need to like take a second and like absorb it and do my thing. And then like the next day or I think 2 days later, I caught a flight home to Philly. And the thing that sucked was that he died in Puerto Rico. And so they had to like ship his body back. And so that prolonged the process by about a week and a half. Then he was, you know, delivered at the funeral home, and it was terrible. But before that, my parents had to go over to Puerto Rico to identify, you know, their son.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, just, you know, and my dad describes it, they're in like this beautiful place for like the worst reason. And yeah, just a huge bummer. That was kind of the whirlwind. Obviously, it's still very, it's the thing I think about overdose deaths and unexpected deaths as well is that it never makes sense. And you always feel like there's something you could have done, even though we all know there wasn't. It's nobody's fault, unless, of course, you know, maybe it is somebody's fault. But like with overdoses, right? You know, it was an accidental overdose. Oh, that's the other thing. Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm going all over the place. But
Please.
you know, there's a lot of guilt, I think, with everyone because it's like, okay, well, if I had just been in touch with him more and like let him know I loved him more and tried to call him more. But the thing is, we all tried to do that. I mean, he literally called me from a number I did not have. And the only way I could communicate with him was commenting on his Instagram posts when he would post them. And every time he posted something, I like let it, I was like, miss you, love you, like, hope you're wearing sunscreen if you're at the beach or something, like shit like that, where I was just like, I just wanted him to know that I was like thinking about him and that I was excited to see him posting and doing all of these things. But yeah, like nobody, I mean, he was so far away and disconnected at that point because he was so far away that it was really tough for anyone to get in touch. And I think he talked probably to my mom the most. And yeah, and I was just kind of like the last one he wanted, or not wanted to talk to, but I'm his sister, so what can I do for him?
No, thank you for sharing this story, and it's it's really beautiful to hear your journey, especially for those who have lost someone in a similar way and maybe haven't heard someone open up about it. And being young and being at work and all of these things, I'm picturing the BuzzFeed office, and like finding out there is so specific, right? And yet, like, where is a good place to find out about these things? Like, nowhere. Like,
right.
So what I'm curious, that day, like, were you able to leave early? Like, did you confide in a coworker or?
Oh yeah, I just got out of there. I mean, I was just outside pacing back and forth. Like, I mean, I think I called my mom and like, we were all just, cause I was like the middleman, right? I'm like the only kid at this point, and like, they have to let me know I'm across the fucking country. It's like, it was just a mess. It was a mess. So I was just outside, like pacing, calling them. My family was texting me because they were finding out, and it was just like terrible. And then I remember, because it was around like 4:00. So it was almost the end of the day anyway, thankfully. And I was like, okay, now I have to get on a shuttle with a bunch of strangers, essentially, and go to my car. And so I was like sitting on the sidewalk by the shuttle bus, like in between that part of the fence where like the parking lot is, where all these other employees. So people are like walking past me. I'm sitting on it. I look like a mess. I mean, obviously, but like I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst fucking day of my life. And I'm like so exposed. And it was just, I mean, looking back, it's kind of funny because I was just like, one thing would happen, and be like, okay, like now next step is just getting home. And we just got to get home, and we got to get on that shuttle, and we got to pretend like nothing's wrong. And then we got to get in our car. And it was just terrible. I mean, it's interesting too, because I feel like the week before he died, it was also, like there are some songs on my Spotify, like a whole chunk of like songs on my like songs that I can't listen to anymore because it was like the week before, like that week of where he died. And weirdly enough, all of the songs were like, I mean, I think I mentioned it was, it felt like this terrible movie was happening. Like everything it's so like, so stupid how everything like, the fact he died right before he was supposed to come home, like, what the fuck is that? Like, are you fucking kidding me? You couldn't just like hold on for a little bit, but whatever. But I was just like, all the songs I was listening to were like these earnest, sad songs. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is also annoying that I'm already like kind of in this weird headspace. And then this happens. It's like, did I manifest this? It was just wild. But yeah, anyway, so I got on the shuttle and I went home. They were just making plans and I ended up actually getting, so I was much more active on social media at this point in my life too. And so a lot of Tommy's friends were like DMing me, and they were like, I just heard that this happened. Is this true? And they're people I had never heard of before in my life, heard of or seen of before or following. Like, and I was just like, who are you? And I think they were all like, it was just bizarre. And so I think it was happening to my parents too. And since I was the one on social media, they were like, would you mind posting so people stop asking us questions?
Right.
So I was like, great, sure thing. So I was the one to make the Facebook post. I posted on my Instagram, and we were like, this happened. We don't know what happened. So at the time we didn't know. I mean, I think we all assumed it was probably like an accidental overdose, but we didn't know. And actually we didn't get the autopsy report back until June of 2020. a full
Wow.
2 years and 1 month after he died because of the hurricane devastation that happened, and so many people died in Puerto Rico that there was literally a backlog of dead people that they had to.
Hey, popping in here to share how much I've personally benefited from individual counseling, specifically virtually. During the pandemic, I opted for online therapy. I'm not going to lie, I thought it would be really fucking weird. At first it was, until I found the right fit. I feel that the right fit in therapy is so important. And yes, a bit of an eye roll that you have to try 2 or 3 people, but hey, it's like dating. The first one's not always the perfect fit. And I was lucky enough to find the perfect fit right away. I used BetterHelp myself. This was before I partnered with them, which is affordable and private therapy virtually. You can do couples therapy, individual therapy, text therapy, phone therapy, or Zoom therapy. I did Zoom. If you're more into a phone moment, that exists too. But I know that therapy is time consuming. A lot of people listening to this are busy gals, guys, and folks on the go. I remember when I went to in-person therapy in Los Angeles before the pandemic, oftentimes I'd have to reschedule due to a last-minute audition or work obligation. With virtual therapy, I've found that I can always find an hour in my week, and you can even reschedule online if something comes up. There's an easy-to-use platform similarly to Calendly or Acuity where you just pick your own times. I feel like you guys have heard me mention the benefits of therapy time and time again, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but just truly, when I lost my dad, there was so much going on. I never went to therapy until years later when my mom was diagnosed, and I only wish that I had gone sooner. Now going through a breakup, I'm in a very vulnerable place and I need regular support from a licensed professional. My friends and family have been awesome, but it's beyond what they can provide, in my opinion, due to how much heartache I'm going through regarding this grief. So if you'd like 10% off your first month, you can try it at betterhelp.com/DOL, as in dying of laughter.
Yeah, so it was tough. The autopsy report came back and they determined again the cause of death was an accidental overdose. The cause of death was fentanyl and cocaine. And they found a bunch of other drugs in his system as well. Like he always had really terrible migraines where he'd like vomit like really bad. So he had an amount of that medication in him that was like an abusive amount, and just a bunch of other things. But he also had caffeine and nicotine in the system, which I kind of laughed at because he was a big smoker, unfortunately, but he was a big smoker and he always had coffee. And so it was like, well, that's, at least there's that. Like that felt kind of silly and fun and familiar to look at, even though it was like a terrible, terrible thing you're reading. The one thing too, so like when he died, my brother was like deathly afraid of needles, but he had a tattoo. And when he was getting this tattoo, he allegedly like passed out like a couple times getting it, which was so silly. And Tommy was always kind of the person that would just do things. Like Tommy was like a YOLO person, like through and through. He'd do anything for attention. And it was usually the most ridiculous things that like nobody in their right mind would do. And so this tattoo he got was a Louis Vuitton tattoo. We don't really know why he got it. Either it was like a dare or, I mean, he told me when I asked him, he was like, I can't afford Louis Vuitton, but I can afford a Louis Vuitton tattoo. And I was like, right on. That's right cool. On. And so then I was like, because I had a tattoo at that point, he had a tattoo, and now I have multiple, but I was like, we should get matching like twin tattoos. And he was like, yeah, that'd be really cool. And so unfortunately he died before we were able to, but so now I have a Louis Vuitton tattoo because that's the only one that he had, which is so silly because it's my silliest dumb tattoo. And I know when I've been in like BuzzFeed videos, people are like, wow, does she have a Louis Vuitton tattoo? And I'm like, literally go fuck yourself.
Like there is a deep fucking meaning here.
Yeah, it's like my brother died. And that's the other thing too. So the autopsy report, when you're reading one, they describe people as like, it is a body of a young, like male, right? So it's like very impersonal, but I also found it kind of poetic in a way because it's like a writing style that you just don't like. I was like, oh wow, this is kind of like, this is terrible to read and I'm sobbing, but like this is kind of interesting. So like the first line or two in his autopsy report was like, it's the body of a male aged 23 with like a Louis Vuitton tattoo on his right shoulder or something. And I was like, cool. I got that stupid, like, I don't know. It's just really finding any fucking thing you can in like the shit to make you feel a little bit better. And that did, because I got the tattoo before we got the autopsy report back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just makes me feel, it's now like one of my most cherished tattoos.
Is it the one that's right there? Like the one on your shoulder
Yes,
right there?
it's right there.
Oh my God,
Yeah, so it's
yes.
pretty big, it's pretty large. And weirdly enough, it kind of goes with, like, my tattoos are kind of like Southwestern themed, and then I have a Louis Vuitton right in the middle of it, but it works. It kind of works.
It totally works. I love that you did that. That's so cool.
But yeah, so that's why I have a Louis Vuitton tattoo. It's not because I'm a weirdo. It's because my brother died. My twin brother. Thank you very much. But yeah, so, just hoping that I have another tattoo for him too. It's like this pack of cigarettes, because like I said, my brother smoked a lot. And there's one left. It's an open packet with just one left, because I'm saving the last one for him when we reunite.
Oh my
once more.
God, that's so cute. I love that.
Thank you. So, we're it's a process. It's a process. I mean, and that's the thing with grief too, right? Is that it never leaves you. It's always with you, and it always pops out when it wants to, in certain ways and for certain reasons. And I think just like having these tattoos, and I mean, it's not really the tattoo. I don't know. It's just like it. I don't know. I love that Tommy was so silly, because I have these like silly memories of him, and our matching tattoo that we got like literally post-mortem was such a silly thing. And so I don't think he ever would have thought, had he still been alive, like I would have never gotten a Louis Vuitton tattoo.
Right.
Ever,
Right.
never, ever. Like, that's so gross. But I have one now, and I love it. And it's like one of my favorite tattoos. So life comes at you in weird freaking ways.
Yes. How many tattoos do you have?
I don't know. I have.
I love that you don't know. I'm obsessed.
I think I have 10-ish around there. Yeah,
Love.
maybe a little more, a little less, give or take.
Working
on it.
So cool. Are you gonna do a full sleeve someday, you think?
I really want to. Yeah, I really want to. I took a pretty long break during the pandemic. I also most of my tattoos are flash also. So I just like walk into a place and I'm like, what do you got? So like, I really want to start maybe planning my tattoos a little bit better.
That is so spontaneous. I
Yeah.
love that. Good for you.
Spontaneous now. But yeah, they're fun. I really like them. My first tattoo, of course, I feel like everyone's first tattoo is, you're like, it has to be very meaningful. And my first tattoo is kind of like the theme of my life, I guess. It was actually, my dad bought it for me for my 20th birthday, because it's an Anya DeFranco lyric. I don't know if you're familiar with Anya DeFranco, but my dad is obsessed with her, and I grew up listening to her, and I'm still obsessed with her. Yeah, and so it's from her song 32 Flavors, and it's God help you if you are a phoenix. And so the full lyric is, God help you if you are a phoenix and you dare to rise up from the ash. 1,000 eyes will smolder with jealousy while you were just flying past. So it's kind of like, when I told one of my friends, they're like, oh, so it's kind of like haters gonna hate. I'm like, I guess, but like not really. Like, it's more beautiful than that. And like, there's a little more nuance, but sure.
Like, what is the millennial slang that I can relate to?
I know, right? But it kind of like, but it's also like my worst tattoo. It sounds so fucking poorly. And it's on my ribs. But I feel like it's just kind of, yeah, like, God help you if you're a phoenix, right? It's like, you keep burning up and you keep coming back. And I feel like it's very much, it's exhausting, but that's life, where it's like shit is going to put you on your ass and you got to get back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you do, it's, you feel so great and you accomplish so much, and it makes it that much easier to get up the next time. But God, is it fucking hard. And then it just keeps getting harder and harder. But it's like just being able to, I don't know, kind of zoom out a little bit and be like, all right, this is uniquely my problem, but in a way that is universally relatable.
Yes.
And so I think that really helps, being like, yeah, like, how it goes. Go through, yeah, somebody died that I loved. And I feel like it happening so young was very interesting too, because going back to like my first experiences with death, I was pretty removed from it. I didn't really know how to talk to people who lost someone close to them. About a year before my brother died, one of my really good friends' dads died, and I did not know what to do. And now looking back, I feel terrible, because she had to kind of like pull me aside and be like, hey, if you're doing things, like, I really want to do them with you. And I was like, okay. But I was also like afraid to like talk about things. Like I was afraid to bring it up because I was so afraid of like those emotions because I knew they were really heavy. Now I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk about Tommy. I want to keep him here. My Louis Vuitton tattoo, people are always like, is that a Louis Vuitton tattoo? And I'm like, yeah. And it like just, it always is just, it's like peacocking, right? Where it's like a gotcha. Now I'm gonna like, you're in my grief trap now. And I'm gonna tell you all about my dead twin. And
Do you share that when people ask you? I'm curious. And when people ask you if you have siblings, do you bring it
yeah,
up?
that's a great question actually. And I can tell you right before I flew home after he died, like the day after he died, I was getting my hair done because of course I was in a BuzzFeed video a couple months before where I literally dyed my hair neon rainbow colors and it had faded away. And my parents were like, you should get your hair dyed before we see everyone. And I was like, okay. Because it looked like shit. So anyway, I was at the hair salon, and I was 23 at the time. So I'm an adult. And for some reason, my hairdresser thought it would be a fun question, be like, how many siblings do you have? Like I'm 12. And I just told her that I had, my little sister Mia, because I didn't feel like being like, yeah, I'm a twin, but like he just died yesterday, and that's why I'm seeing you now because I got to get my hair done
Wow.
for this funeral. So I just skipped over it. It really depends, actually, and that is something that I do struggle with still. With like, do I say that I'm a twin? Like, am I still a twin? And that's actually something I've been dealing with too, where it's like I found this online grief group called Twinless Twins International, and it's
Amazing.
just yeah, it's just a bunch of twins. Whether you've lost your twin like in the womb or as like a young kid or a baby, a lot of the people in it are like middle aged or older. Lucky for them, those bastards. But it helps because I felt like I was unpacking all this grief, and it's very deep for everyone, and it's so interesting too because it's like it obviously sucks from my parents as well because it's their child that they made, but I also wonder too if it sucks worse for them as well because it was half of a twin thing. Like I know that's why it sucks a little bit harder for me, I think, because we literally went through everything together. He's my twin. Like there's just biologically, I think, something different about that. And we weren't identical. I can't speak necessarily for like an identical twin loss. I'm sure that's probably much worse in a way. Who knows? I don't know. It's very individual, but it just sucks. It just sucks. And I think it's just been really helpful to know that there are other twins out there and that it is, I guess, like a little bit different and a little bit more specific, and it is a
Yeah.
community that I belong to now. And yeah, but the sibling question, it's tough because like I am a twin, and that always, like, when people are like, let's do an icebreaker, like what are 3 fun things about you, is always, I was like, okay, well, I'm a twin is always going to be one of them. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, because people are always like, oh, twin, like, do you like what are they like? And I'm like, oh, they're dead. So it's like it's just interesting. Then they're like, oh, like, did they die in the womb? I'm like, no, they died 2 years ago, like 3 years ago, something like that. And then they're like, oh, and then they're like, oh shit, I just opened this can of worms. But the thing is too, it's like, right, I wanted to talk about it. Like it's sad. That's the thing. Like it's just sad. Like it's just tragic. But I like, keeping him here, and it's always an awkward moment kind of when I talk about him, but I feel like I've gotten okay at talking about it to the point where I don't like alienate the person I'm talking to. I'm just like, yeah, you know, we miss him. But look at my Louis Vuitton tattoo, like something like just like that silly little, I don't know,
Yeah.
silly
How
little
has your
addition.
grief evolved over time? How would you say like you felt when it first happened versus now?
Yeah, I was really, really angry when it first happened. I remember being just so pissed. And I felt like I was just looking for stuff to be mad at, looking for people that I could be pissed off at. Or I was like, oh, look at your perfect little life, and you know, and look at my stupid tragic life. And for a while it actually like kind of made me feel better to be mad, I think, because I think it was better than being, I mean, of course I was super sad at the same time, but it just like felt nice to like point a finger and be like, for a second, be like, yeah, fuck you. Like my life's so much worse. But then I would think that way, and I would like, it would make myself laugh because I was like, we're gonna get over it. And like, yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. Like it's a huge fucking bummer. And it's like I also had a lot of guilt. I feel like now, So, okay, it started as anger. I was really, really angry all the time. And then probably a year afterwards, then it became like extreme guilt. Like I had survivor's guilt because I'm like, well, we went through everything together and I made it out. Like I'm still here and he didn't. And then just like, what if I had done this? Or, what if everything had been different? Right. So then there was a lot of guilt. And now I think I'm just, I think I'll read pictures of him and stuff and I'll just be like, fuck, like I wish this wasn't like the only picture of that I have, or like I wish we could have like more memories and I wish we could have seen him come out on the other end of this, like everyone said would happen, right? So it's just like, and then I feel a lot of anger still, I think, at some of his friends. A lot of his friends also, have drug problems and they're still here. And I feel a lot of getting better now, but especially in the beginning, I felt a lot of resentment towards them and like, well, they're the ones that he was talking to. Why couldn't they help him? Because some of them went to rehab. That's neither here nor there. And it was ultimately up to Tommy to, live his life and that's it. And that's nobody's fault. But yeah, I think now I'm just like, I'll get like a pang of grief or I'll see a picture and I'll just be like, like, damn, fuck, shit. And then I just try to, I kind of like acknowledge the feeling and I feel like I haven't had like a grief meltdown in a while. I feel like I usually get them like once a year where I'm just like, crying and sobbing. But then I always feel so much better afterwards. Like
Yeah.
I look forward to them because it's like I call it like flushing your mental toilet, where it's just like there's so much built up and it's so clogged, and all of a sudden you just flush it all out and you just feel, I mean, you're so sad in the moment and you have every right to be and you have every right to feel every emotion you're feeling. But like, I freaking love crying it all out. Like it's so refreshing. And it just reminds you too, it's like, it's very validating. It's like, yes, this experience is true. It happened. It was very hard. It's still very hard. And I feel like it really just, I don't know, having a meltdown kind of connects you in a bad way, but also maybe in a good way to, those fresh emotions, like when it happened. It's just like, just reminds you that it's like, okay, we're still trucking, we're still grooving, and like this is a fact of life now. But just kind of like honoring how far you've come. Like again, I'm not as angry anymore. I don't feel as much guilt, but it's always just gonna be sad.
That's really well said. And I like the image of flushing the mental toilet. I'm like, yep, just gotta flush it out. Because sometimes I feel like I also have mental constipation and it's all not coming out at all. And I'm like, I want to cry. I want to get it out. And it's just like stuck. So I like that image. Since it is the Dying of Laughter podcast, you've mentioned some comedic stories already, but I wonder, is there something that comes to mind that's comedic or bizarre, like so funny or weird you just had to laugh surrounding your grief experience?
I think, yeah. So at my brother's funeral, I spoke and it was terrible. Whatever, it was all terrible. But it was a Catholic funeral, and we're like technically Catholic, but like not practicing at all. I actually hate Catholicism, but like I'm confirmed. Whatever. My confirmation name is Scholastica, like super duper fucking Catholic. So anyway, it was at this like Catholic funeral home, and he was buried in like a Catholic with my grandparents, Catholic burial ground, whatever you call it. So anywho, the priest is like praying over him, doing all this stuff, and then they get the holy water out and they like shake it over you. And the whole time I was like looking at my parents. I remember talking to my mom after this too. I was holding my breath because I was like expecting him to like burst into flames or like start smoking like in a horror movie when they like put the holy water over it. And I remember just being so relieved and kind of like laughing. And then afterwards I told my mom too. I was like, oh, when they did that holy water thing, I was like really nervous. And she was like, oh my God, Emily, I was too. So that was kind of funny in the moment. It kind of, I think the funniest things are just like the silliest memories that I have. I mean, to be completely honest, it's really hard to find anything like kind of funny about it. I mean, not that you have to,
Totally.
and not that it's impossible, but it's like the whole thing just sucked. But that was a funny moment. And then also at the luncheon, actually afterwards, two of my best friends, a lot of my friends came for it, thankfully. But the food was really bad, and there was like some sort of dessert, and it was like literally a cardboard cake. And I'm at my brother's funeral, and like I said, I was very much on social media the whole time. So I'm like posting a bunch of things about it, and I was like, is this weird? But like it's making me feel better, because again, I just my not that social media is necessarily creative, but it's also not creative, so I was like,
Yes.
whatever, it just feels good to do something, and like people are seeing it, and it's validating me, and I need that right now because I'm really upset. But anyway, I posted this Instagram story at the luncheon after my brother's funeral of my friends and I like smacking this cake with a fork, and the fork's like bouncing off of this cake. So that was kind of silly. But yeah, it's kind of, but that, yeah, my Louis Vuitton tattoo, I don't know. It just,
That the tattoo, I was gonna say, that's an example of like a fun story there. So.
yeah.
And the bad
So
food. Oh gosh, I'm
yeah,
laughing because I'm like,
it was pretty rank.
it's like not important to have good food at a funeral, but also like kind of, or just like
Yeah.
you forget about those random, but like who cares? But it's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, totally. But I just remember the dessert being like hilariously gross.
Amazing. And then I want to just ask just a couple more things here. I personally don't really think there's ever such a thing as closure with anything really, other than what you can give to yourself. I mean, so many people, myself included, seek external validation or answers to like move on to the next thing. So I don't really think that is a thing other than doing it within yourself. But because your brother, he was in Puerto Rico and with the accidental overdose, I wonder, was there any kind of accountability, if you care to share, with his bosses or coworkers? Or I know you didn't find things out for a couple years, but I wonder what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, not really. Like it was really a mess. We looked, we have his phone, and like we looked through his phone to, get more answers and get a little bit more context into what was actually going on. And I mean, his life was a mess, and his boss was treating him terribly. I don't necessarily like want to share the text. Like there was a really upsetting text that his boss sent him like a week before he died, because his boss was also his landlord back in Pennsylvania, and so he was still making him pay rent. And so there's just a really like weird, kind of scary text about that. Like, and then yeah, just some other stories about like when he was like dying, that like he had roommates, and like just yeah. So not the kind of closure you want. It's more so just like context around what was happening, and it was just, very horrible. So yeah, I think the biggest closure was just like we all were just kind of like, yeah, it was probably drugs. And for me it was more so like, oh, this was much worse than I thought, like his problems. And yeah, I mean, really just getting the autopsy report again 2+ years later was the biggest sense of closure. But to your point, like I definitely, in the years before we got the report, had found closure with it. And a dead person is a dead person. There's no like that. That's it. You can't go back. You can't turn back time. And I think with tragic deaths too, and like accidents and what have you, it's all you want is closure. And in instances like that, there really is none. Shit happens all the time to really good people, and really, whoever, all people. Shit happens constantly. I think really just being able to like take it at face value and be like, this happened, and I survived it, and I'm gonna have to kind of keep dealing with it in whatever ways it pops up over the course of my life, and that's okay. And you didn't do anything wrong. You're not a bad person. You still deserve love. You still deserve happiness. Yeah, I think for me too, like a way that I found closure and still kind of do is, my brother lives to party. He loved to party. He loved a good time. And there have been times over the course of, the last couple of years where I've, been partying, and I've, maybe been drunk or smoked a little bit of weed or something. And I'm just, having a good time, very safely, of course, with like my really good friends. And just being like, wow, like just acknowledging in that moment, just being like, wow, I'm having a really good time. And then I'll just have like this kind of like picture of Tommy and be like, this is the feeling that he was like trying to chase all the time. And I feel like, I guess I'm like happy in a weird way that I'm like kind of fucked up, because it's not like, woohoo, I'm fucked up and I'm escaping my problems. It's like, I'm able to like do it in a safe way, and every once in a while, and it is fun. It is fun. Like there's a reason why partying is so big, because it is fun. And whenever I catch myself like acknowledging that, I always think of him. It's really nice in a weird way, right? It's really nice. And when he came to visit me in college that one time, it was, we went out partying and it was really nice, and then we had a good time. And it's like, it's just, but in those good moments, there's, those memories. But I'm it's interesting to be like, feeling so good and then be reminded of something so terrible. But again, there's something like that's kind of like my favorite, I think, manifestation of my grief is one that does happen. And it used to be really jarring. Like I remember I was on a trip with some friends and my boyfriend, and same thing, like, they were in from out of town. We were like drinking a little bit at our Airbnb and just, having a good time and talking. And all of a sudden I was just like, I thought of Tommy, and I had to remove myself and go sob in the bathroom for a while. And then the night was over for me. But like now when it happens, I'm able to make it like a positive. And I'm not a super spiritual person, but I do think that like, if Tommy's gonna be with me anywhere, it's probably like in those moments in a way. Or at least that's what I like to think now. It helps me from like, sobbing my eyes out when it's happening. That's in a positive, I guess, in a weird way. It's just being like, oh, Tommy would have been glad that this was happening. Tommy would have liked that I was letting loose, because I was always, again, like a little more uptight and anxious and cautious and careful. And he was the exact opposite of that. So whenever I can tap into that side.
I love that. Is there a book or film or podcast or resource that helped you with your grief at the time, or something that is inspiring you currently?
I started going to therapy after. You know what? This sucks to admit, and I'm just gonna do a caveat and be like, I know Chris D'Elia is a terrible man, but I didn't know that at the time. And I started watching his stand-up set like right after Tommy died, and it made me laugh. And so I was like, oh, I like Chris D'Elia. Now I don't, but I just have to caveat. I don't follow him. I don't listen to his stuff. I don't do anything with him anymore. But it made me laugh in the moment. Like it really helped. And that's kind of when I got into like at least watching more stand-up sets and more shit like that. But I mean, I didn't know. There are a couple books on my list that I haven't read about grief. There are a couple of podcasts that are on my list that I haven't listened to. I feel like the biggest thing for me is just, my therapist was very helpful, and I am very open, I guess, about this part of my life. And I have very lucky to have a really great friend group, and I'm close with my family and everything. So I feel like the biggest thing has just been talking about it and letting myself, flush my mental toilet about it. And yeah, and just acknowledging it as it comes. And yeah, and just, a lot of my friends now, unfortunately, I mean, the older we get, the more people are going to have pretty bad, tough, close experiences with death. And that also is a comfort, knowing that it's going to get, I mean, in this respect, it's kind of going to get easier from here on out, because it's all going to happen to us. Like everyone, like all of our parents are going to die, like that's tough for like,
Yeah.
it's just siblings, aunts, uncles, dog, friends, you never know. And as much as that sucks, and I don't want anyone to experience it, we all will. And, being so young and having such a, having your sibling die so like tragically, I mean, it's like a drug overdose, like that's dirty, right? Like nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to touch that. People cast folks struggling with addiction aside and call them bad and call them not worthy of help or love. That sucks. And that's not fair. And, people struggling with addiction, they turn to it to cope for the most part. I mean, everyone's got their own issues and reasons for things, but like, people turn to drugs because they're at the end of the rope and they're so sad and they just need help, and they don't know how to ask for it. And then, it's sucks. And so I don't know, I think his death has definitely made me a more compassionate person. I definitely am less weird with grief now, and I am not afraid to ask questions about someone's grief because I know that I like to talk about Tommy and I like to keep him here, and talking about it kind of helps unravel some of those like thoughts and questions and stuff in your head. And I've just gotten so much out of sharing my experience and sharing Tommy with other people. That's kind of like the biggest thing I guess I've gotten out of it, is that it's made me kind of like everyone deals with shit. Everyone deals with shit. Everyone got shit. And it's just like, just be kind. Like, just be as nice as you can, just because you can be nice, you know? Just like surprise yourself with how fucking nice you can be and live your life that way. I think that's like the biggest thing I've gotten out of it. So yeah, I was like really freaking angry at first. I've always kind of been an angry person, I guess. And I think it's really made me realize that it's exhausting to be so mad all the time, especially about things you can't change. And to just, yeah, just please say please, thank you, be really nice, really kind, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And if they suck, then also to tell them they suck. And that's it, that's it.
Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing all of these takeaways. And I'm glad that you mentioned addiction, specifically people having X, Y, or Z thoughts about casting them aside. Mental health is absolutely as valid, of course, as physical health. And it's just apples and oranges, right? And the more we can talk about it and make other people feel valid in their own experiences related to addiction, the better. So I appreciate you sharing all of this. Do you have any final thoughts or takeaways you want to share? A, and B, do you have any questions for me?
One thing I wanted to actually add to the last question, because you asked about books and stuff. I did, right after Tommy died, a couple months later, Beautiful Boy with Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet came out, and I went and saw that by myself, and I sobbed the whole time. Amazing, beautiful movie. Really glad it had a happy ending. But it really felt validating, I think, for me at the time, especially because I went and saw it by myself. And again, of course, me being very much on social media at the time, posted a selfie sobbing in my car. I was like, just saw Beautiful Boy by myself, but it helps. So
the dad that wrote that book is from where I'm from. There's really, really high rates of teen drug use where I'm from. So yeah, Marin County.
Terrible. Same though. My high school was literally called The Pharmacy.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow.
Bad. Very
beautiful
bad.
Movie though. So yeah, that's and
definitely recommend it, but bring tissues.
Yes.
And then I guess a question for you, like, I want to know like how like your grief journey. How are you feeling now?
You're so nice to ask. I will not go into my full hour-long grief journey. Thank goodness. We'll wrap up in just a second here. But yeah, no, it's been interesting. I think you mean there's a certain sense of a removal that I have from it just because every week now I'm doing this, and yet also that's there to protect you, right? I mean, if I was sobbing every interview, that wouldn't make for like a very good podcast. But no, I've always been interested in these topics, as my dad was dying for my entire life. If you look at it that way, his first symptoms when I was 4. So I've just always been really interested in seeing what people think about all of this. And I feel like these interviews kind of make sense. And like you said, as you get older, you can have more empathy and understanding. I'm like, wow, my dad was paralyzed for over a decade and like had to quit his job because he couldn't move. Like that makes sense why he was like in a bad mood a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So clarity there, and just exploring, my mom has had, we did the amazing video, and I'll talk about it in the intro, with my mom last year. And now it's been like 5 years and she's in a clinical trial, and it's like always crazy, but it could totally be worse. And like you're saying, more friends as you get older are going to experience this. And yet I still don't have like a bajillion friends by any means. Like I still, like, all of my friends have their parents. So,
and they're all healthy, right? They're all like running marathons and shit, of course. Yeah.
So I don't like wish it upon anyone to go through, even though you and I have also been through completely different experiences, but it does kind of help in a way. Like you're saying, like, it's bad, but it's sad, but it's relatable that everyone will at some point go through this. But thank you for sharing your story today. And sharing specifically about being a twin and losing a sibling in and of itself is, less common than a parent because even of age, right? People are more likely to die as they get older. So it's really important and helpful to hear about your experience, especially for those who've lost siblings. They want to hear from someone who's lost a sibling. So I just really appreciate everything that you shared today.
Thank you so much for letting me cry on your podcast. It was really really awesome. Like truly, this I always love talking about Tommy. Thank you so much for letting me do that on your podcast. I'm so excited.
Of course. Where can people find you online on the social medias? And I know we are going to wrap it up and we could talk for like an hour about your career, but if you don't mind just sharing, like, you've had an awesome career at BuzzFeed and now you're editing and producing and directing and doing cool stuff. Can you just share like what you're excited about this year work-wise and where people can follow you online?
Yeah, sure. I'm an editor, so looking to edit movies and TV. I've been doing some fun little funky videos and editing short films the past couple years. So definitely check out my website, emilytrio.com. If you need an editor, I'd love to chat. Otherwise, my Instagram is rockstar2_Barbie. I put some silly shit, and that's it. That's me.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Emily. I really appreciate it. I can't wait for this to come out.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's been so fun.
Yay. Grief is fun. No, it's not. Okay.
We love it.
Yay. We love grief. No, we don't. Yodo, you only die once. Thanks so much for sticking around. That's the end of our episode. Emily, what a powerhouse. I learned so much and I'm grateful to those listening. So if you liked what you heard, sharing the episode with a friend goes a long way, as does leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. That's a huge gift you can give to an indie podcaster such as myself. So I really appreciate for those of you who do that. And I would love to return the favor to you as well. Just hit me in the DMs and let me know how I can support your work. Next week, we'll be speaking with Holly Eve, talking about how over 15,000 people reading your article online helps with your business, starting a company at 29, speaking at USC, and losing your friend to breast cancer, rescuing a dog after divorce, being hit by a car, and being in the hospital for a month. That's with Holly Eve, who will be discussing natural deodorant and its relationship to breast cancer and how she's a badass entrepreneur that has her own company that is thriving and thrived even more so in the pandemic. Can't wait to share it with you. That's what's up next week. Sneak peek. And don't forget, y'all, Yodo, you only die once. Hey, popping in here to share how much I've personally benefited from individual counseling, specifically virtually. During the pandemic, I opted for online therapy. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it would be really fucking weird. At first it was, until I found the right fit. I feel that the right fit in therapy is so important, and yes, a bit of an eye roll that you have to try 2 or 3 people, but hey, it's like dating. The first one's not always the perfect fit. And I was lucky enough to find the perfect fit right away. I used BetterHelp myself. This was before I partnered with them, which is affordable and private therapy virtually. You can do couples therapy, individual therapy, text therapy, phone therapy, or Zoom therapy. I did Zoom. If you're more into a phone moment, that exists too. But I know that therapy is time consuming. A lot of people listening to this are busy gals, guys, and folks on the go. I remember when I went to in-person therapy in Los Angeles before the pandemic, oftentimes I'd have to reschedule due to a last-minute audition or work obligation. With virtual therapy, I've found that I can always find an hour in my week, and you can even reschedule online if something comes up. There's an easy-to-use platform similarly to Calendly or Acuity where you just pick your own times. I feel like you guys have heard me mention the benefits of therapy time and time again, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but just truly, when I lost my dad, there was so much going on. I never went to therapy until years later when my mom was diagnosed, and I only wish that I had gone sooner. Now going through a breakup, I'm in a very vulnerable place and I need regular support from a licensed professional. My friends and family have been awesome, but it's beyond what they can provide, in my opinion, due to how much heartache I'm going through regarding this grief. So if you'd like 10% off your first month, you can try it at betterhelp.com/DOL, as in dying of laughter. So the letter D is in dog, O is in ostrich, L is in love ya. Yes, I just threw that in. It's just a service I genuinely believe in, and I wanted to pass that on to you. So whether you try BetterHelp, an in-person therapist, or you find another way to express yourself with a licensed professional,